Hey everyone, our project is titled Implicit Neural Representations for Deformable Objects. Our fundamental aim has been trying to find a smarter way to model deformable objects. Ultimately, we could use these models to do downstream tasks like keypoint estimation. Keypoint estimation is difficult on deformable objects due to the many different deformation configurations. As we will show, generalized implicit neural representations are naturally invariant to object deformations since they rely on topological features of the object. What are implicit neural representations? INRs are functions that parameterize conventionally discrete signals, like the pixels of an image are points in a point cloud, and learn a continuous function that maps the domain of the signal. These functions are not dependent on the spatial resolution of the original signal, unlike standard ML models, which provide an estimate of each pixel within an image. The caveat is that most INRs are trained on data residing strictly in Euclidean space, so even though INRs learn functions that aren't dependent on spatial resolution, they're still tied to some Euclidean space. Modeling deformable objects means we can't be tied to this kind of space. Generalized INRs can be thought of as applying INRs in non-Euclidean domains. Given the assumption that a continuous signal exists on some unknown topological space, we can sample a discrete graph from the space. We then compute a spectral embedding for each node in the graph. This embedding allows us to approximate each node's location since there's no coordinate system. We can then use a neural net to learn the mappings between the spectral embedding of each node to some predicted signal. In our case, this part is a classification problem where we wish to output one of n labels per node.
Here are the first three components of the computed GNR embeddings for the Stanford bunny. We see that the components vary smoothly over the bunny's surface. Because GNR embeddings only depend on the topology of an object, they are independent of a coordinate frame. Thus, we can use them for learning representations of deformable objects. Here, we investigate GNRs for key point prediction. Here is the Stanford bunny with a few key points labeled, corresponding to the right ear, the right eye, and the tail. Our project seeks to answer the following key questions. Are GNR embeddings informative enough for key point prediction on objects? Can they generalize to unseen deformations of an object? And finally, can they generalize to undersampled/oversampled mesh representations? Our experimental setup consists of manually labeling key points on an undeformed or canonical object of interest. Here, we choose the Stanford bunny with 5 classes of key points. Note that the number of labeled key points is much lesser than the number of total points in the mesh. We create deformations of the canonical bunny by simulating impact with the ground and manual deformation. Here is an animation showing the impact simulation of the bunny with the ground. To perform this simulation, we first generalized the 2D surface mesh to get a 3D volume mesh, and we then simulated it in PyDrake by dropping the bunny from a height and recording the positions after impact. Once we have these deformations, we consider additional modifications such as random addition of new points and edges, oversampling, or undersampling the resultant mesh. All of these modifications affect the underlying topology of the object.
Next, we will present the results from our experiments. Here we show an example of the training data for the canonical bunny mesh with labeled points colored by their class. On the bottom, we will show an example deformation of the bunny with predicted classes. Notably, we found our model struggled with false positives, but was able to correctly classify all of the labeled points. We also observed that once our model performed well on the training example, it achieved identical results on the deformed example since their mesh structure was the same, which demonstrates the utility of GINR's inherent invariance to coordinate changes. Additionally, we evaluated how our model was able to classify key points when the meshes were modified. We perturbed the meshes by randomly adding 10% new vertices to the mesh. We trained our GINR using 15 sample meshes and evaluated it on 5. We saw that the GINRs did not require many examples to generalize well to perturb meshes, but having a smaller embedding size acted like a regularizer for our model. We also tested the ability of our model to generalize to oversampled and undersampled meshes. We trained our model on a single canonical example and observed that it was relatively robust to uniform oversampling, but significantly underperformed on undersampled meshes. We hypothesized that the undersampling has a greater influence on the spectral embeddings, leading to this erroneous behavior. In summary, we show that GINRs are useful for learning implicit representations on deformed objects due to their natural invariance properties. We see that they are able to generalize to some variations but have improved robustness when trained on various mesh perturbations. In the future, we would like to extend this study by investigating how our model performs on meshes which are inferred from unstructured point cloud data. We foresee that these meshes will contain a greater degree of variability and would like to see how GINRs are able to perform under more naturalistic conditions. Lastly, we are interested in how we were able to use the topological structure of the mesh to register known object shapes onto partially observed data.